Thank you. I want to thank all the news stations for totally taking up this entire podium with your microphones. That's good. Look, it is great to be here. Mike, I want to thank you for the invitation to come, and thank you, Daryl, for the introduction. I now know that Dr. Patel and Kent and I all have something in common with respect to high jumps. They're both accomplished high jumpers, and at about 9:45 p.m. on election night last November, I promise you, had somebody been there with a tape measure, I'd have beat them all. It's good to be back with you, and please don't tell Don I laughed at the first two song titles. I'm not sure I'll make it to 32 years if y'all tell her. It is good to be here today. We obviously started a legislative session on Monday, and I'll talk about some of the priorities that I have for the session in just a moment. But I do want to start with the biggest issue of the day, and it happens to be coronavirus, which is serious. And before I get started, just generally how we should approach this is we all have to take it seriously. There's a role for all of us to play in terms of making sure that it doesn't spread more than necessary, and we're all violating some of those precautions right now, just so you know. We'll talk about those in just a moment. Because the worst thing that can happen is to have people act in ways that are not thoughtful, not deliberate, and that's just counterproductive. But it is serious, and so I'd ask for your help, and there's going to be some things that you all can do. As of last night, we have 6 presumptive positive cases in Louisiana. When I spoke to the legislature at 1 p.m. on Monday, we had 1. Yesterday morning, we got 2 more, and then last night there were 3 additional cases. All 6 cases are in Orleans Parish. 5 of them are treating in Orleans hospitals, and 1 is in St. Tammany at the moment. Now, I say presumptive positive because when we test at the public lab here run by the Office of Public Health at LDH in Baton Rouge, that is a presumptive positive test. We then send the test to the CDC, and then they will confirm it. We are very, very confident in the testing, and so there's virtually no difference between presumptive positive and positive, and certainly we're regarding all these individuals as positive, which means we're investigating the cases. It's a very scientific term, but it's an epidemiological investigation. And so we now have to go back and figure out where, if we can, did these individuals contract the infection, this viral infection. We then have to figure out about when that happened, what is their travel history, who have they interacted with since that time, and then we have to contact those individuals and try to see if we can determine whether they are symptomatic and so forth. And as you can imagine, this is very time and labor intensive, but you have to do it all as quickly as you possibly can, and certainly we are in the process now of gathering as much information as we can about those patients, their family members, and other people that they may have come into contact with. It's really important that the public take certain measures to protect their health and reduce the spread of the illness. And reducing the spread of the illness is critically important. First of all, we want the peak to be as low as it can be, and we want the duration to not come all at one time, because then you overwhelm your capacity to deliver health care. You also overwhelm the capacity to do testing. And the key to both of those things is everybody doing their part. And it's really not brain surgery or rocket science here. And it's the same sort of things we should be doing anyway in the height of flu season. And so I'm gonna go through those. You need to avoid going out in public or going to work or to church or anywhere else if you are sick. Stay home. You need to wash your hands more frequently and more fervently. And I'm assuming that if you heard from Dr. Bankston, you've heard these things already from her as well, and you're probably seeing them every time you go on the internet or watch CNN or whatever news channel you're looking at. Social distancing, this is the one that I think we're all violating right now, and that is we don't need to be as close to one another as we sometimes like to get. It is very hard for me, I will tell you, and I suspect it is for most of you too, when I came in the room a while ago, my inclination is to shake every hand of everybody that I'm close enough to shake their hand. That's just not the right thing to do right now. And so I need you to be conscious of that. Older people need to consider additional measures, like avoiding any kind of unnecessary airline travel and reducing their public interactions to avoid their potential exposure to illness. And I know we've heard certain folks from Washington, D.C. And by the way, I'm speaking with the task force that Vice President Pence is in charge of just about every day. And I was on the phone with him just before coming over here. And you're going to see, as we learn more about the virus and transmission and so forth, guidance is going to change. So don't think we know everything today that we're going to know by the end of the week and next week and so forth. But older people and people with underlying health conditions are the ones most at risk, because we have enough cases from around the world with common denominators that they're learning very rapidly. And so really it's about age 60 where there's a difference between the impacts. Of course, it's greatest above 80, and people who have health conditions like COPD, like some sort of immune issue, and it could be that they are going through chemotherapy after cancer treatment, that sort of thing. So those individuals need to be extremely careful, and I know that some folks in Washington have opined that under no circumstances should those people go on a cruise right now. So I pass that along to you. If there's any good news, it is that young children are not, thus far at least, being impacted very much by this at all. That's certainly good. 80% of the people who are confirmed positive report symptoms that are relatively mild, and they get better without a lot of intervention. And on the other side of that, it obviously gets more serious, and right now, not only is there not an immunization, there's really not an approved treatment either. Most people do get through it. However, there are some deaths associated with this as well. And that death rate, as best we can tell, is on an order of magnitude several times more than the flu. And of course, exactly what the denominator is in terms of how many people have coronavirus, we don't really know. We just know those who are testing positive. So we're learning a lot, but decisions have to be made pretty quickly about the coronavirus, and that's one of the reasons why this afternoon, and one of the reasons I have to leave soon, is to prepare for this. We're going to have a unified command group meeting, and now we have no shortage of these meetings in Louisiana, but typically they're to deal with floods and hurricanes and so forth. But we will be having another one of these UCG meetings this afternoon, after which I will have a press conference, and that press conference should be, for those of you who are going to be there, around 5:30. Give or take just a little bit. So I've just given notice of that. We know that testing for COVID-19 is expanding this week as commercial labs come on board. We expect to see more presumptive positives in the coming days and weeks. That's what's happened around the world. That's what the CDC is telling us to expect. And so I don't want anybody to see that and then panic, if you will. That just doesn't help anything. I can assure you we're going to continue to be as transparent as we possibly can. We're going to get as much information to you as quickly and accurately as we can. There are certain limitations that I have around HIPAA, and so I quite often will know or think I know more than I can tell you. But those people in the back room are pretty good about finding additional information and sharing it with you. So you won't be in the dark for long. That's not the way this is playing out. And by the way, I'm not really picking on y'all. Y'all are doing your job. I'm not picking on you at all. But I want to get back to the legislative session now. And I know that when you start off talking about the coronavirus, that's not very positive. That's not very uplifting. And I apologize for that. And of course, on Monday when I spoke to the legislature, I had to start off in much the same way. But there are a lot of reasons to be positive about our state right now. I will tell you that we are in a better place today on a whole host of measures than we were just a few years ago. And I think that it was our bipartisan approach that helped to stabilize our state. And Darrell told you $1 billion. Jay sitting out there, it was actually $2 billion to start the year July 1st, 2016. That's what we were short. We were short $1 billion to close the year out. So between January and June 30th, we had to come up with $1 billion just to close that particular year. But we're in a better place. We're investing in higher education and K through 12 education, again, for the first time in a decade. We've given our teachers a pay raise. We've invested more in early childhood education. We've landed 216 major economic development wins, delivering more than 40,800 new jobs, retaining more than 36,000 jobs, and involving more than $42 billion in new capital investment. And one of the things that's exciting to me is of our 64 parishes, those economic development wins were in 52 of them. And so we are spreading this around the state of Louisiana. We still have a lot of work to do, and I know that we still have challenges. You can rest assured that throughout my second term, we're going to continue to focus heavily on education and workforce development. I think those are essential things if we're going to continue to draw the investment, have the opportunities in Louisiana for jobs and careers, and so forth. So you've seen that the budget for next year that Jay and I presented to the legislature includes $25 million more for early childhood education. And it'll actually be more than that, counting some federal sources, because we've landed a federal grant of $33 million that'll pay us $11 million over each of the next 3 years. And the reason we're focused so heavily on early childhood education is more than 80% of a person's brain development, no matter how old they get, is going to happen before they're 4 years old. So if you wait till someone is school age to start trying to teach them, you've waited too long. And quite frankly, our schools do about as good a job as schools anywhere educating the kids who show up ready to learn. We have more than our fair share of kids who show up and they're not ready to learn. So getting more of our kids in quality early childhood education settings is the key to closing the achievement gaps and producing the education outcomes that we all want for our children. We also have $30 million more in new funding for higher education and a $39 million increase to the MFP, which is the funding formula for K through 12. And we're recommending that all of that go to teacher pay raise because we have teachers who are not at the Southern regional average. And it is still true that the #1 ingredient for quality education is a highly motivated teacher in that classroom with those children teaching in his or her area of certification. And we've got to make sure that we're working with our school districts so they have what it takes to attract and retain really good teachers. There's some other things that we're doing. We're going to focus on increasing dual enrollment opportunities. I want every junior and senior in Louisiana to have an opportunity to get a college credit before he or she leaves high school. Some of them will actually be able to get an associate's degree. Some are going to be able to get an industry-based credential. That's incredibly important, and it plays a bigger part in the overall workforce initiative that we have, but also the master plan for higher education that the Board of Regents came up with. And if you haven't heard about it, it has the potential to truly transform our state like almost nothing we've ever done. And the goal is over the next 10 years, by 2030, 60% of all working age adults, 25 to 64, will have a post-secondary credential or degree. Now, we've got a ways to go to get there. But Moody's has actually picked up on our efforts, and even though they're a credit rating agency, they said when we are successful, I use the word when, they use the word if. But when we are successful, we are going to transform the state of Louisiana and unleash so much opportunity and prosperity that has eluded us for a long time. We're going to work on more apprenticeship programs. The Jobs for America's Graduates, don't know if you're familiar with that program. It's been in Louisiana for a long time. It services about 6,000 at-risk students, all of whom are at risk. And the graduation rate from high school still exceeds 90%. And the percentage of these young people that go on to post-secondary education or find full-time work is more than twice the percentage of all students, not at-risk students, all students. And so the JAG program is really important, I think, for our future. It has a statewide footprint, and one of the goals that I have is to, again, double the number of the programs. We did that in my first year, despite that budget deficit, because I believe in JAG. So we went from about 60 programs to 124 programs. I want to get to 200 programs over the course of this term, because this is investing in something we know is successful. I mean, this is a national best practice, and I would say that even if I were not the national JAG chair this year. I'm also excited about a number of other bills that we have. Quite frankly, everybody in this room, we all know that automobile insurance is too high in Louisiana. I think we need to focus on changes that are proven to reduce rates. I don't believe that insurance companies should be able to take certain things into account when they figure out what you're going to pay as a premium. And you know, they do it based on gender. They do it on individuals in the military who return from a deployment. Blue collar folks, and look, I understand looking at somebody's driving record, but not all these other extraneous things, and we've got some bills to deal with that, and I think it's the right thing to do, and certainly there's a couple of bills out there that would enact some changes to our tort system, and I'm happy to sit down with those individuals and talk about those bills as well, to see where there's agreement and that we can move forward. I also think that we need to do some things in Louisiana about what we pay our employees. The minimum wage today is $7.25. It's been $7.25 since 2009. Congress last changed it then. They're out of the business. We're one of 5 states that hasn't adopted our own minimum wage. And I will tell you, $7.25 is not adequate. I believe we need to raise the minimum wage in Louisiana. I think we need to address the gender gap, which is the largest in the country here in Louisiana. So that is the difference between what we pay men and women when they have the same qualifications doing the same job. It's about 66 cents on the dollar. And for women of color, it's closer to 50 cents on the dollar. We need to do something about that, and what we've targeted is a couple of things that are just common sense. One of which is if there's more pay transparency. If an employee can't be fired or punished by his employer for talking about his or her wages, then we know that transparency will translate to more pay equity. It just happens. And so we want to make sure that we address pay secrecy. The other thing is, we don't believe that a potential employer ought to be able to ask and then base compensation on what the person they're interviewing was paid in their last job. Because if you've got a lady who was underpaid in her last job and you're going to base this job's compensation on that last job, then you've got a gap that you're never going to bridge. And that doesn't always translate into what they're paying for that job to people who earned more in their previous job. And so there's just a better way to do these things. These are relatively simple, common sense things that we think will go a long way. And I would just ask the people in this room to consider how many children today are living in poverty simply because we don't pay their parents what they deserve to be paid, either because they're working for minimum wage or because their mother is paid 66 cents or 50 cents or whatever it is on the dollar compared to her male counterpart. I think sticking with some issues that are important to us that relate specifically to women, I think we need to improve workplace accommodations for pregnant women. Oftentimes they get reassigned to desk duty, or they may lose their job altogether when a small accommodation is all that they need. Maybe they need a stool to sit on, maybe they need more frequent restroom breaks and that sort of stuff. Some assistance on occasion with heavy lifting. So we want to make sure that we're addressing these things as well. We're also going to promote the implementation of a maternal mortality review to ensure that hospitals and birthing centers have written policies and procedures whereby they timely and accurately investigate any maternal death and report that. We actually have problems in Louisiana relative to other states when it comes to maternal mortality, and black women are 4 times more likely to experience a pregnancy-related death, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And we've already done some things over the last couple of years that have made tremendous improvements in this area. We have reduced the percentage of women who have significant bleeding, hemorrhaging, childbirth by about 30%. I think the number of women who give birth while they have high blood pressure has been reduced by 50%. And the differences between the races has been closed by about 60% because of those things that we've done. And so we need to continue this and make sure that we're promoting better health for mothers and for babies. So that's some of what we're going to be focusing on this session. Again, we certainly, like I guess every state and like we always have, we have our challenges. And the coronavirus is another one that we didn't want, didn't ask for. But I am encouraged. I'm excited about the future of Louisiana. And I believe at the end of this 4 years, we will be stronger and we will be better than we are today. But it's only going to be true if we continue to work together. I am very optimistic about that as well. And I've had plenty of conversations with our new Speaker of the House and Clay Sexsnyder and the President of the Senate, Paige Cortez, and a number of legislators. And I just sense a real willingness to work together. Not that we're always going to agree. And by the way, if we always agreed on everything, it would be a boring world. But where we disagree, we still have to be able to work together in good faith. And I think we can do that in Louisiana. And it doesn't happen that often in Washington, D.C., quite frankly. And so one of the things that we can't do is we can't take our inspiration from there. I mean, you can if you want to go to the Lincoln Memorial and that sort of stuff. But we shouldn't take our inspiration as to how we are going to govern and work together, whether you're Republicans, Democrats, or Independents, by what we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. So if we will do these things, if we'll work together, if we'll still be bipartisan, and I think we will, things are going to get only better in Louisiana. I want to thank you for your contributions, and I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what I told the folks at the prayer breakfast yesterday, which was a tremendous prayer breakfast, by the way. For those of you who were there, that was probably the most dynamic speaker that I have ever had the pleasure to listen to. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Chaplain Dr. Black, who is the Senate chaplain for the United States Congress. We can look there for some inspiration. I can tell you he was excellent. But I do believe in the power of prayer. And for all of the challenges that face Louisiana, including coronavirus at present, I'm asking people to do that as well as all the precautionary things that I mentioned before. I think it makes a difference. And I always try to remember to lead off with a prayer of thanksgiving before I go into the prayers of petition, because I just think that that's important as well. So I encourage you to pray for our country and pray for our state and pray for leaders at all levels, and that we will be better, that we will leave this state better for our children than we found it. That is our mission, and we're not going to be the first generation that fails in that mission. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much.